Hello and welcome to my dungeon. It's been 8 years since the Symbaroum core rules came out. A lot has happened in these 8 years. I've started this YouTube channel and my Symbaroum content is one of the most popular on my channel. We've gotten a player's guide, a monster guide, a game master's guide, a couple of adventure collections, and of course the big campaign, the Throne of Thorns. One of the most epic campaigns you can get in fantasy RPG that leads the party all over the wider Davokar region, culminating in a grand finale in the city of Symbaroum itself that will leave the game world forever changed. So now that the last adventure of the campaign, Davokar Awakens, has come out, I thought it'd be a good opportunity to take a look at the campaign as a whole, tell you my opinion about it and how I would run it. Spoiler alert, I love the lore, but I would change a lot about the campaign. If you like content like this, consider subscribing to my channel and liking this video down below. There's a lot more where this came from. Now let's get into this game master's perspective. When reading the campaign prompt for the Throne of Thorns, and especially after reading the last adventure, Davokar Awakens, one gets the impression that the main conflict of the campaign is between three great cosmic forces. Virta, the power that creates unbridled nature. Wielder, the power that changes and controls and cultivates the power of civilization, be it human, elven, or whatever. And Vratha, the power that reacts. When Wielder oppresses Virta too much, Vratha reacts and destroys both of them. Intelligent life and beings that create culture and civilization come from unbridled nature, from Virta, so begets. And they, in turn, control. And finally, if they control too much, Vratha destroys all. This is not a cosmic struggle between three forces. This is more of a cosmic principle. But this is not the main conflict of the game. Instead, the main conflict is between the Ambrians, who have moved into the Davokar region, fleeing the destruction of the homeland. They are represented mainly by the Queen and House Koinur. And they are in conflict with the forces that already live in the region, because of course they are. And these are represented by the barbarian clans, but also by the elves of the Iron Pact. And you could make an arrow want to conquer. But to make this more complicated, among the Ambrians we have more factions. We have House Korinor, we have the Church of Prios, and the cultists from the Sacred of the Old Blood. And within the Church of Prios we have two more factions again. We have the Traditionalists that control the church at the moment, and we have the Reformists. Same with the clans. We have actually even more factions within the clans. We have Tharaban, who wants to negotiate with the Ambrians. We have the Beast clan. They just want to gain power and survive. We have the Sovereign Oath, who just want to dominate, and they also hate magic and witches. And then we have the witches, which are in theory independent of the clans and should mediate conflict and build peace between the clans, but in practice they are mostly allied with Theraban, and when Theraban falls, with themselves. Also within the Iron Pact we have those that want to negotiate, the soft faction if you will, and the war faction that just want to wipe out humanity altogether to prevent their follies. Are you following me so far? Because we also have the spiders that want to re-establish their ancient spider kingdom and are in conflict with both the clans and the Ambrians and all of the factions here. And within each of these factions we have 1, 2, 3 or sometimes more important characters, and we have some characters like Mayor Nightpitch who are not part of any of the factions, not really. And while with a setup like this you have huge potential for intrigue and conflict, it is just too much for an adventure story to keep track of. So what I would do if I wanted to prepare this campaign is to reduce this to 3 main factions. Ambrians, the clans, and the spiders, because the Iron Pact just has one uncompromising motivation, and that is that no one gets into Davokar, no one gets to Symba, no one gets the Throne of Thorns. And with such a single-minded motivation, there's no room for diplomacy, compromise, and intrigue. Also, the spiders add a creepy, non-human vibe to the whole setting. Within each of these factions, I would focus on 2, maximum 3 sub-factions. So of the Ambrians, that would be the Queen and House Korinor, the Sacred of the Old Blood, and maybe the Church of Prios, but depending if I have any players who play characters that are part of the church, some priests or Templars maybe, I would leave the internal conflict out of any of the main stories. For the clans I would focus on Theraban and the Beast Clan, because that gives me some nice parallels with the Ambrians here. Theraban is like the established civilized power, just like House Korinor, and the Beast Clan is the corruption-wielding dark magic wildcard, like the Sacred of the Old Blood. The Sovereign Oath, they hate everything that is magic, I don't like them. They don't do much for the setting. What I would do is take some of the ideas that made it into the Sovereign Oath and put them in the Beast Clan. So the Beast Clan could be led by the Blood Daughter, because that's a cool name, but it sounds like they're doing a lot of dark, forbidden blood magic, so that fits way better with Beast Clan. As a third faction, again, we would have the Witches, but they would try to hold up the taboos and to mediate between the different factions of the clans. So as long as none of my players play a witch, I wouldn't make the witches a major faction in and of itself. Same with the Iron Pact. As long as my players don't want to play a band of Ironsworn, I wouldn't make this a major faction to negotiate and broker peace with. They are more like a constant background presence, which is their actual role in the campaign, but If they're only a background presence, then I don't have to visit the halls of 1,000 Tears and have so many prominent elven characters. Just whittle it down to maybe 3 prominent elven characters that the players can meet over the course of the campaign. And now for the spiders, there are actually 2 factions within the spiders. One faction wants to reincarnate the Spider King and make war against everyone else once again, and the others don't. Maybe they want to crown a new king or a queen or something completely new. They are not a major faction in the standard Throne of Thorns campaign. I would have to work on this. Put 2 or 3 prominent spider characters and sub-factions in here that the players can interact with during the campaign. But like this, we can have a 3-faction power struggle with shifting alliances. If one of the factions gets too strong, the other 2 factions can team up to beat them back down until they will eventually break their alliance because their goals aren't aligned. Using this as the basics, I would create a dynamic campaign with shifting goals that is using the locations, the backgrounds and the inciting incidents of the Throne of Thorns campaign, but all of the actual story beats I would make up dynamically as I go, using these 3 factions and my players that will push the action forward by enacting their own plans. Now let's go into the 6 actual adventures for a bit and I tell you what I would do with them. In general, I love the background and the lore of the Symbaroum world, of the Davokar region. I love how dark and gritty it is, how thought out, and how all of the major events of history nicely fit into each other. There's always this kind of foreboding, slightly melancholic feeling I get when immersing myself in the lore, greatly helped by the beautiful, moody artwork. But I hate how the actual adventures are presented and structured, and major points about the plot of the whole campaign, but a few of the adventures in particular. Let me get a bit into detail in this. Firstly, there's too much mandatory combat for my taste. Most of these major adventures begin with a big mandatory combat scene. Wrath of the Warden begins with an attack on Thistlehold. Witchhammer begins with an attack on Karvosti. Indaros begins with a meteor strike and a battle in Indaros. Mother of Darkness doesn't begin with mandatory combat, but it could. The Haunted Waste begins with the battle at the hills of Belagro, which at least is actually the siege of Stone Oak Castle for a bit of variety. And finally, Davokar Awakens begins with a battle on a floating log bridge. This concept in general can work very well to get your players right into the game, start with a big action scene. But for my taste, this is all a bit much. And these opening scenes are just an example of all the combat that is in these adventures. Works well enough with the Symbaroum rule system because combat is very fast, but I generally prefer RPG systems where combat is a bit more deadly and the characters actually want to avoid unnecessary combat and think of clever solutions to the conflict. Try a bit of diplomacy and skullduggery. For my liking, there are also way too detailed descriptions of how things work and how things could play out, with rule advice and instruction for the GM that I just don't need, and I don't think any GM will need after they have played through the first few adventures of the game. Like in this section, in the second to last adventure, way to the catacombs, there are traps on a successful vigilant test aimed at the ruined frame. I don't need the adventure to tell me how an object of importance is spotted by the party, what they have to roll at, not at this point of the game. This could all be way shorter, more concise, and easier to keep track of for the GM. In general, with the setup of the story and the setting, I think there's real chance that the group will at some point earn a fiefdom or start a settlement or at least an outpost somewhere in the Davokar region, so there's a big chance to do some domain play. But the rules presented in the Game Master's Guide are severely limited and lacking. They're just these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages for domain play. So if your group really wanted to get in domain play and maybe build their own wooden castle, their fortified outpost in the forest, from which they would send their own expeditions, maybe a trading outpost even, you would need more rules than here. Maybe use the ones from the Forbidden Lands as inspiration, also by Free League, which has a very solid stronghold domain play base that cover all of the bases of domain play and constructing your own fortress, your own outpost, including what you could build there, what retainers you could hire there, and some events that could happen at the stronghold. Now back to the actual adventures. In general, the first 5 books of the campaign double up as a regional source book for different parts of the Davokar regions. Wrath of the Warden is mainly a regional description of Thistlehold. Kavosti is mainly a description of the clan's domain of the Light Davokar. Yendarus is a description of Umbrian and the capital Indarus in particular. Zimba is mainly about the Dark Davokar and expeditions into ancient Symbaran ruins in Davokar, Zimba in particular. And Alberator completes the game world with the recently lost realms of Alberator, where the Ambrians came from, and Lystra, the realm of the Dark Lord. But honestly, without this adventure, your group would not have motivation to go there ever. Finally, the last adventure just lets us revisit the locations of the previous adventures. Now, how would I actually try to run this massive campaign? For the first adventure, the Wrath of the Wardens, set in Thistlehold, I would discard almost the entire plot. It's a frustrating investigation through Thistlehold with way too many dead ends and no consequences for the campaign of a whole. Nothing really is accomplished in this adventure, so I would have to change that up in a major way. This is the first major adventure, so what we want to do here is introduce the game world and the major factions of the game world and their conflict. For each of my 3 major factions, I would have a major NPC that I aim to introduce to the players during the course of this adventure. For the Ambrians, that would be the representative of the ruling power, Captain Varvello of the Town Watch. Here a picture from Kavosti, because there is none in Witchhammer. He can become a returning character throughout the entire campaign that is leading the Queen's forces on dangerous expeditions. But at the same time, he's just a guy, just an everyman, not a fanatic. He can be reasoned with, he can be reasonably honorable, he can be negotiated with. He's shrewd and can act with different strategies, making him an ideal, versatile NPC to represent this faction. While other characters like the Queen herself or the Church of Priors or the Princess can act more in a background role. For the second Umbrian faction, the Sacred of the Old Blood, would have Agramai Kalfas, who in the first adventure, Wrath of the Wands, is only known as the Prince. He is instigating corruption, cult uprisings and incidents in Thistlehold to test out some black magic rituals without actually sacrificing his own members, and generally to stir up a bit of trouble and maybe gain some powerful allies in the meantime. So in the first adventure, it's unlikely that the player characters will meet him personally, but they should hear about him. His cults are stirring up trouble, chief among them the Midnight Cult, but also Red Eye and Arok the Dark's cultists. This gives much opportunity for the characters to come in conflict with the different cults, maybe take them out, but they should always hear some mention, find some hint that there's someone pulling the cult's strings from the backgrounds, the Prince. And eventually they should learn that the Prince belongs to an even greater organization that is called the Sacred of the Old Blood. So we are foreshadowing the major antagonist in the later parts of the campaign. But it is this character, Agramai Kalfas, and his work that you have to introduce somehow in the first adventure, not in the fourth. For the major clan faction, High Chieftain Tharaban, we'd have the witches that come as diplomats, and also Yeleta and Major Nightpitch, the former rulers of Thistlehold, that should play a major part and be a voice of diplomacy and reason. But as long as we are still within Umbrian-controlled territory and not in Light Davokar, not in Kavosti, they shouldn't be a major power. They're mostly a source of information and contacts. One of that contacts will be the elves of the Iron Pact, but unless the characters want to join the Iron Pact and become Ironsworn, I don't see a reason why they have to go to the Hall of 1,000 Tears. Now for the second clan faction, the one using the powers of corruption, we can use the Beast Clan. And the Beast Clan can have something in the caves beneath Thistlehold, and they can attack Thistlehold. But this whole concept of them living down there beneath the town of Thistlehold for years with no one noticing is stupid. The Beast Clan would need another name so that the players will take them seriously. So instead we should call them by the clan's name, which is not done very often in this adventure. I think the clan is called Jizite, the remnants of the clan that used to live in Thistlehold before the Umbrians conquered it. So either we use the name Clan Jizite, or we rename the Beast Clan to the Sovereign Oath. And their leader should become the Blood Daughter. Anyway, I wouldn't have them live down here in these caves, but maybe at the beginning of the adventure they have an expedition down in this cave, and they are stirring up trouble in town. They are stealing food, maybe they are taking prisoners and slaves, and their goal would be to reclaim this power node and do a huge ritual to enslave or wipe out the entire population of Thistlehold to reclaim their ancestral lands. As my third faction, I had decided on the spiders. And for them I would use some material from the small adventure The Tomb of Dying Dreams. And this faction's representative can be Xanathar, the giant white spider. She could have some allies among the human or maybe goblin population of the town, former adventurers that she may have met in Davokar, that she may have saved, that have a pact with her and are working as her eyes and ears. That might even be the player characters after they've played the Tomb of Dying Dreams. And now the main conflict and goal of this adventure becomes the struggle for the power node. The Queen, Automagica, and Captain Marvello want to control the node to keep control of the town. The Sacred of the Old Blood would want to try out a huge ritual of demonic ascension once they learn of the power node, which would really stir things up. Finally, the Spiders too would want to take control of this power node, or would rather have that no one controls this node before it falls into the hands of the humans. So maybe they will plot to destroy it. And now we have a three-way struggle for this node. And all the magic knowledge and artifact and ritual sacrifices. And one of them even could be this Davokar forest god Bull's Head. And many of the events that happen in Wrath of the Wardens then could happen in the adventure, but in a very different way and in a very different context, introducing the major factions and with consequences for later adventures, especially if control over Thistlehold falls to a new power. And unless you have a player that is part of the church, forget all the subplots with Fazel Feno, Father Savola. Forget Arluin altogether. He's not part of my campaign, not at all. Forget the Templars. Forget the complete subplot of Sarkomel's prophecy. The campaign does too after this adventure, and I can't find the actual prophecy anywhere. It's never used for anything, so you just might as well forget about it altogether. Just focus on your three main factions and introduce the main players of the power struggle for now to your players during the first adventure. The second adventure, The Witch Hammer, is raised by several expedition adventure groups to find the adventurer Elemendra, who supposedly has found the way to legendary Symbar. So it's a race to find her and find the way to Symbar for your faction. So again, each of your major factions should have a stake in this adventure, should have a group of explorers, of adventurers representing them. You can use again Captain Marvello for the Queen. Forget the Templars. Use some of the other group for the Sacred of the Old Blood. They might have hired a few freelancers to do their dirty work, instead of organizing the whole expedition themselves. The attackers on Tharaban at the very beginning become the Jazites, the Beast Clan, the Blood Daughter and the Beast Clan instead of the Bowing Sovereign Oath. And they too should have several forces in the forest searching for the way to Symbar. And finally, as your wildcard, you should send out a force of spiders. Or at least use a group of adventurers that has a pact with spiders to represent this faction. Also, during the events of the adventure, as a background event, the Queen's army conquers Kavosti. But honestly, that is a way more important plot development than the actual adventure. So if you want this plot event to happen in your world, that would be the actual focus of the plot. The different powers would fight over control of Kavosti. There might be a siege, there might be diplomacy. Characters might have to go out and find allies, find artifacts to support whatever faction they ally with. The conquest of Kavosti is such a major event in the game world that it shouldn't happen in the background. But if at the end of this adventure your players have traced the steps of Elemendras, the adventure should end with them catching up to Elemendra. It's a huge disappointment, a huge letdown, if they just find a stone tablet that they can't translate at the moment. The hunt for the adventurer Elamendra and the way to Symbar can only end when Elamendra and the way to Symbar is found. So either place her somewhere at the end of this adventure, maybe change the effect of the Raven's Doom ritual that is protecting the tablet. It, instead of just doing useless corruption and leaving whoever is stealing that thing totally capable of still stealing that thing, just slightly more corrupted, make it do massive damage. She has been seriously injured. Maybe she has taken an elixir of life that has in turn corrupted her, and she is unable to continue her quest on her own. Maybe the allies she brought with her have been killed by the trap, and she is stuck there until someone comes that she can ally with. Or give the characters the information on where to actually find her right away. Don't let them wait for it. So this adventure will lead directly into Indaros, the Darkest Star. And since this is set in Indaros, the characters will probably have to find new contacts, new allies, to get their bearings in this unknown town and this unknown power structures. But once again, use your 3 major factions and the 2 to 3 sub-factions. All of them should have agents within the city that could become allies or adversaries of the characters of the party. This also means, again, that you have to completely change the events of this adventure. Cullinan Furia, the main antagonist of this adventure, has to become a character of consequence. He can't be acting on his lonesome. He must belong to one of the major factions of the struggle, and his actions must have something to do with the search for Symbar, with the major power struggle. So I would say, make him a member of the Sacred of the Old Blood. He's looking into corruption anyway, and they're ruthless enough to attack the cathedral of civilians in it with a meteor storm. All of that might have been instigated by Duchess Esmeralda herself, the leader of the Sacred of the Old Blood, in an attempt to gain some power over her sister, maybe get rid of some other contestants to the throne, maybe get rid of the arranged marriage, and maybe even to make her appear as the innocent victim, because she's in the cathedral while it is attacked, so it appears like an attempt on her life, while actually she instigated it. She may even have used a Goroth from Alberator the Haunted Waste, so she wouldn't be in danger herself when the meteor strikes. Just have to make sure that the Goroth somehow survives, or maybe quickly take the puppet's place after it has been destroyed. Other than that, the hunt for Symbar's tomb and the map to Symbaroum is on. Maybe still the hunt for Elamendra, but maybe she is found at this point, is actually with the party, is now an ally of the party. And she helps the players gain some contacts in Yndaros, because she might know people here while the players might not. And at the very end, have at least 2, better 3 different parties reach the stone ship. So there's room for a power struggle and some intrigue and skullduggery and last-minute alliances and betrays on this ship for the grand finale. And once the players have this map, the preparations to find Symbar will begin. This adventure you can actually play mostly as it is. Just keep in mind that the different expeditions sent to Symbaroum should represent your major factions and their major representatives. Once again, you can use Captain Marvello as a representative of the Queen. Forget about the Sun Church, forget about Aloin, and make the Sacred of the Old Blood and Clan Jezai, the Beast Clan, the Sovereign Oath, and not to forget the Spiders, a major faction in this adventure, that will all descend upon Symbar itself, trying to reach and claim the Throne of Thorns first. And at the end of this adventure, while it is clear that they can't just sit on this throne without the Rosai, it should be clear that there is something like the Rosai, and there should be a way to search for it, so the characters are not completely lost and stuck. They should know where they should go looking for the Rosai. And that will neatly lead you into Alberator, the Haunted Waste. And instead of hunting the queen and her party this entire time, I would once again make it a race between different adventuring parties for the Rosai throughout the whole adventure, rather than just this fruitless retracing of where the queen have been. And at each of the major plot locations, you have potential to come into conflict with the agents of the other factions. And once the Rosai is claimed, the next race for Symbaroum through the awakening Davokar is on. At the end of your campaign, don't assume that your group should go anywhere. It's very much up to what allies the characters have made throughout the whole campaign. Maybe they have a home in Thistlehold, maybe they have a duchy in Indaros, maybe they are Ironsworn of the Iron Pact, maybe they have a pact with spiders. You don't know, you have to improvise and give them a very good and personal reason why they should go and hunt for Umbal Saber. Once again, your major factions should all be represented in Umbal Saber, at least 3 factions. Not just a stare-off between 2 factions. You can use the lore, the location, and the characters presented in this adventure, but once again, forget all of the plot and very much do your own thing. For example, the giant Garavarax that had been slumbering under Kavosti goes down like a sucker in this adventure. Killed by a swarm of demons, like clambering on him like fire ants. And I think that is totally underutilizing that giant. If the player characters and their group don't have to bring him down in an epic fight, if one of the NPC factions is to bring him down, maybe even if it are the Sacred of the Old Blood and their demons, then after that have them reanimate Garavarax as a totally corrupted undead giants, and then at some points the characters will have to fight that. Now that would be epic. But at the end, everything will come to a fateful decision in the restored Symbaroum at the Throne of Thorns. And it should very well all depend on what your players, the player characters, have done out throughout the whole campaign. Who they have allied with, who they have fought against, which characters have become important, which characters have died. And once again, at the end here, you want at least three of your major factions at play here to make things interesting. To sum up my advice for the Throne of Thorns campaign: great background, great lore, great settings, locations, great characters, but forget all of the plot. Forget all of the pre-written story and make your own thing. The Davokar region is yours and your groups to play with as they want. The fate of this world should not be predetermined by the pre-written plot, but very much reflect the actions and desires of your player group. It will be a lot of work, but I think it is worth it. This is a great setting. This is the basis for a great campaign. For now, I bid thee farewell, dreamers, until we shall meet again.